Ancient Egyptian civilization. In today's video, we will discuss the most horrifying yet interesting sacrifice done by the Egyptians. It is so crazy that you won't believe it. Let's start without any further ado. The Bride of the Nile. Now listen very carefully because this is something straight out of a horror movie. The ancient Egyptians had an odd tradition where they chose a virgin girl from a village who would be the bride of the Nile. Every year during the annual flooding season, which typically took place around September, the Egyptians believed that the Nile River demanded a human sacrifice in order for the river to give a good harvest. As a result, they selected one lucky girl who would become the wife of the Nile god. The girl would then be taken from her family and paraded through the streets with flowers and incense being thrown upon her. After this parade, she would be taken to the riverbank, where she would have to jump into the water fully clothed while holding gold coins. Yes, you heard me right, fully clothed. This was done in order to prevent her body from polluting the sacred waters of the river. And this wasn't the end of it. Once in the water, she would proceed to walk into the river until she disappeared beneath its surface. The villagers would then believe that she had become one with the Nile and that her soul had ascended to heaven. But there was more to this horrifying ordeal than met the eye. You see, once she entered the water, the priests would start chanting and making offerings to the gods. They would ask the gods to accept the girl's soul and grant them a good harvest for the coming year. However, the girl who was now the bride of the Nile didn't always willingly jump into the river. Sometimes she would appear at the edge of the river crying, or even try to pull other people into the water with her. The priests would then have to grab her and drag her down into the water with the utmost force. The girl would then put up quite a fight, thrashing and screaming until she was finally submerged underwater. Even after all this, sometimes the priests had to make sure that she did not resurface again. To do this, they would tie stones or metals to her body in order to ensure that she would stay underwater. Imagine the horror of this poor girl who has done nothing wrong but is being forced to sacrifice her life for the sake of a good harvest. Her screams echoing along the riverbanks as she struggles to free herself from the grasp of those who are determined to fulfill their ancient traditions. What a nightmarish situation this must have been. Now, let's get back to the topic. It was believed that the Nile flooded every year because it was the body of the god Ammit, who was also known as the devourer of souls. The ancient Egyptians believed that the girl who was being sacrificed was actually being married to the god Ammit. And when she jumped into the river, she was actually jumping into the arms of her would-be husband. But of course, we now know that the girl was not being welcomed by the god, but was instead being drowned by him. The floodwaters were seen as the god's tears, and the girl's sacrifice was meant to appease him and prevent him from causing even more destruction. It's a sad tale, but one that helps us understand the ancient Egyptians' beliefs and customs. They believed that the Nile was a powerful god who needed to be respected and appeased in order for their crops to grow and their land to be fruitful. And so they made great sacrifices, both human and otherwise, in order to keep him happy. It's hard to imagine the kind of courage it must have taken for these young girls to willingly jump into the unknown, knowing that they may never be seen again. It's a testament to their bravery and their commitment to their faith that they were willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good of their community. We can learn from their bravery and their selflessness, but we can also marvel at their strength and their determination. However, let's not forget that these sacrifices were not always peaceful. Sometimes the girls who were chosen for the sacrifice were reluctant to give their lives to the Nile. The ancient Egyptians believed that the Nile was a living being, and some girls who were chosen for the sacrifice believed that the river was trying to take their lives. This is why some girls fought against the priests as they were being led to the river, and even tried to harm themselves in order to avoid being sacrificed. Some girls also believed that the Nile was trying to communicate with them, and they felt that they had to listen to its messages. This is why some girls who were being led to the river stopped and listened intently to the sounds of the water, or even spoke back to it as if it were a person. These moments of resistance and communication between the girls and the river were seen as acts of courage and faith, and they were often witnessed by crowds of people who came to watch the sacrifice. The priests would try to calm the girls down and convince them that the sacrifice was necessary, but sometimes the girls would continue to resist until they were actually thrown into the river. Even when the girls were in the river, they sometimes continued to fight against the priests and villagers who were trying to hold them down. They would thrash about in the water, trying to free themselves from the ropes that were holding them down. And some girls even managed to free themselves and swim to the banks of the river, where they were then grabbed and pulled back into the water. Despite all this resistance, the priests and villagers were determined to complete the sacrifice and appease the Nile. They believed that the fate of their crops and their very survival depended on the success of the sacrifice, and they were not about to let anything stand in their way. Now, before we move forward, I want to show you guys something really cool. Our team is creating facsimiles of ancient Egyptian artifacts. We use AI to bring ancient Egyptian art to life. Check out our page to see what we have created so far. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this one. What do you think about this scary bride of the Nile? Do you think that these sacrifices were necessary? Let me know your thoughts below. Also, please like this video if you enjoyed watching it. Thank you for watching.